In the middle of the 18th century, on a small island deep in the heart of the Indian Ocean, one of the most tragic stories of all time unfolded. A tale of survival and unimaginable suffering, of enslaved people who were taken from their homeland illegally, only to face a cruel and unexpected fate after the ship they were kidnapped on was wrecked. The result? A group of helpless, powerless human beings were left stranded on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean. They fought to survive for 15 long years. They relied on their secrets, their skills, and left behind a legacy that the world still remembers to this day. Let me tell you the story of the forgotten slaves of the island of sand. It all began in July 1761, when a French ship named Utile, operated by the French East India Company, departed from the island of Mauritius, known at the time as Isle de France. Officially, the ship's goal was a cargo mission to Madagascar. However, its captain, Jean de Lafargue, had his own secret plan. Behind the scenes, he arranged an illegal transaction. He bought 160 slaves, men, women, and children from Madagascar, hoping to smuggle them and sell them on the black market for extra profit. This was risky, not only morally but legally. At the time, France had placed a ban on slave trading due to the ongoing conflict with Britain, known as the 7 Years' War. But greed has always spoken louder than law. The slaves were locked in the dark, cramped cargo hold of the ship. The air was suffocating. There was barely any space to lie down. Many had no idea where they were being taken or what awaited them. Captain Lafargue knew he was taking a dangerous path, but he was determined to carry out his plan. Then, disaster struck. On the night of July 31st, a powerful storm rolled across the ocean. The sea became violent, with winds exceeding 37 miles per hour. Visibility dropped to nothing. Lafargue, trying to navigate in the chaos, turned to his maps. But there was another problem. The two maps gave conflicting positions for the location of Rodrigues Island, his intended destination. He had to make a choice in the dark, and he chose wrong. Before dawn, the ship struck coral reefs surrounding a tiny, uninhabited island. The impact was brutal. The hull of the ship tore open. Water flooded the vessel, especially the area where the slaves were held. Many drowned instantly, unable to escape the iron-bolted cargo hold. Out of the 160 enslaved people, only 68 managed to escape the sinking ship and reach the island's shore. Most of the French crew survived, but 20 of them drowned while swimming to land. The survivors found themselves on a desolate island, a barren, scorching wasteland, with no fresh water, no edible plants, and no shelter. It was later called Tromelin Island. The land was only about 200 acres in size, flat and lifeless. Its surface was almost entirely sand, with occasional short bushes and grasses that bore no fruit. There were no animals to hunt. The only signs of life were a few seabirds and turtles that visited the island to lay their eggs. The heat was unbearable, the storms terrifying, and the only source of drinking water came from rare tropical downpours. The initial days were chaos. Captain Lafargue, suffering a nervous breakdown, isolated himself. Leadership fell to his second-in-command, Barthélemy Castellan-Duvernay, a man just as cruel. One of his first decisions was to separate the enslaved survivors from the French crew. Though all had survived the same disaster, they would not share the same fate. Barthélemy ordered everyone to salvage whatever they could from the wreck. Bits of wood, nails, ropes, anything that had floated to shore. The enslaved were forced to work under brutal conditions, yet when it came to food or water, they were given barely anything. 8 enslaved people died of thirst in the first few days. Despite this, a plan was set into motion. Barthélemy decided to build a new ship from the wreckage. Over 2 months, the crew, with the forced labor of the enslaved, constructed a large boat called La Providence. On September 27, 1761, just 2 months after the wreck, the French crew boarded the vessel and left. The enslaved people were not allowed on board. They were promised that a rescue ship would be sent. They waited. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, months to years. Those left behind had no choice but to adapt or die. They built shelters by digging deep into the sand and supporting them with coral and wreckage. They collected rainwater in makeshift basins. They caught turtles and birds when they could. They boiled what little they had using metal scraps from the wreck. They even made tools and nails from melted materials and bones. They never gave up hope. Over the years, they tried building rafts again and again. One raft, carrying 18 people, disappeared into the sea and was never seen again. No one knew if they drowned or found land. Another raft was built with more care using bird feathers as sails. It too vanished without a trace. Back in Mauritius, Barthélemy was tormented. He tried repeatedly to convince the government to send a rescue mission. But war, politics, and indifference made it impossible. No ship was sent for over a decade. Only in 1775, 14 years after the shipwreck, did a rescue mission finally set sail. But even then, the ship turned back after seeing the dangerous reefs. 15 years after the tragedy, on November 29, 1776, a French warship under the command of Captain Jacques-Marie Boudin de Tromelin finally reached the island. What he found shocked him. Out of the original 160 enslaved people, only 8 had survived, 7 women and an infant. The baby's name would become Jacques Moïse, named after Moses, the one saved from the waters. Captain Tromelin took the survivors back to Mauritius, where a new, more humane governor welcomed them personally. He declared that they had never been slaves. They were free people who had been illegally kidnapped. They were granted French citizenship, homes, and the right to remain in Mauritius. They refused to ever board a ship again. Who could blame them? Their story disappeared for centuries until historians uncovered it from the writings of Barthélemy and old naval records. In the early 2000s, archaeologists led 4 major expeditions to Tromelin Island, finding remnants of shelters, tools, and items made by the survivors. The island is now a UNESCO heritage site, a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the horrors of slavery. This was the forgotten story of the slaves of Tromelin, a story buried by time and indifference, but one that continues to echo, a story that must be remembered. If this story moved you, consider sharing it. Let the world know what happened on that island, because some stories deserve to be heard, no matter how long it takes.